Welcome to Fast Friends, the podcast that centers on high performance storytelling with high performance athletes and individuals whose norm is to live at the very top 0.01%, whether it's competition, coaching, business, or life. We dive into their stories, how they got there, the journey, and life on the other side. I'm your host, Dan Walsh, and I'm joined by my co host, Justin Faber. Justin and I were rowing teammates in college and later on the U.S. national team. Though we went on separate journeys, since then we've come together to bring these stories to life and share perspectives with our audience as well as our guests. Hey everybody, welcome back to Fast Friends with Dan Walsh. I got my co-host Justin Faber and my old Muppets Luke Walton and Steve Coppola up in the nosebleeds here for commentary. But very excited to have one of my good friends and somebody who in all my years of training and coaching and rowing, I've never seen make such an impact on a team as this amazing woman, Caroline Lind. Caroline, really appreciative you coming on to the show. I can't wait to hear your story and how you got into rowing and how you became one of the best female rowers for the United States, for the world. And just, you really are an honor to have on the show. So thank you. And before we get too far into it, Justin, introduce this amazing woman and why she's here.
Yeah, so to Dan's point, really, really excited to have Caroline on today. Just to set up for the audience, a quick background on Caroline, just to help us kind of go through this as today's show evolves. Let me just give you a little bit of information and backstory about Caroline, and then obviously we'll hear from her own words on how this kind of parlays into the full story. But Caroline joins us today, obviously from Oakland, California, but originally she's actually from Greensboro, North Carolina. She went to school though in Andover, Massachusetts at Phillips Academy, where she was actually a pretty stellar athlete in 3 different sports. Rowing was one of them, as well as basketball and water polo. And then during that time, she was also a member of the women's junior national rowing team before she got recruited to go on and row at Princeton. Caroline went on to have a super successful college career at Princeton as well. Earning a spot on the national team during her summer after, only her junior year of college. And then in 2006, she wound up winning a national championship with the Tigers in her senior year. So super awesome career in collegiate rowing up to that point. And then for some, I think that, hey, that could be a really nice ending, could be a really final, cool final chapter, great success. But that was really just where the story started to accelerate and really kind of for Caroline, it really took off. So after graduating from Princeton, she continued rowing the women's senior national team full time, went on to achieve, to Dan's point, tremendous success, winning 6 world championships, 6 SIX world championships, 2 Olympic gold medals, 1 in Beijing, 1 in London. And then along the way, her crew set world record times. So obviously a powerhouse to have on today's show. And then, with that, Caroline spent over a decade on the national team, was inducted in the U.S. Rowing Hall of Fame, the New York Athletic Club Hall of Fame, North Carolina Sports Hall of Fame. And then in 2004, she was also named the #1 female rower by the International Rowing Federation. Caroline, amazing background, so much to cover. Welcome to Fast Friends on Mettle Factory. We are super excited to have you on today's show and hear a lot about what I just spoke to, but then also I'm sure it's going to go into a lot of different directions, which we're really stoked on kind of digging into. But yeah, I'll flip it back to Dan. But again,
the queen is in the building. The queen is in the building.
For who we're talking with here.
Yeah. Thanks, guys. It's great to be here with you all.
Thank you.
So Caroline, my favorite first question is, so why do you think you're here?
I think I'm here because you guys know me and I was an easy get.
Potentially.
I think the last way I would describe you is an easy get, but yeah, I think you're here because part of this Fast Friends is that you are a good friend. And
yeah,
you're definitely here because you're part of this 0.01% of the world that has achieved something that most people can't understand. I really want to know why you chose rowing. I think that in rowing, there's this myth that it's a sport for the misfit toys out there where they couldn't do any other sport, so they chose rowing. And I really don't believe in that. I think in order to be a great oarsman or oarswoman, you have to be an exceptional athlete, period. as Justin mentioned, you were good at other sports. I had wrestling as an option. I know some of our teammates had football and other sports, but why rowing besides water polo or basketball, especially considering that you're, North Carolina legacy?
Yeah, it's a great question. I definitely was pretty talented in a lot of different sports. And even before I went to Andover, I got eighth in the state in hurdles in the 300, the 400 hurdle, whatever it was, 300 or 400 hurdles, when I was in public high school before I pivoted to Andover. So, and in a state like North Carolina with such incredible athletes, like that's no easy feat. And so I definitely had athletic options, and I always sort of had envisioned myself following in my dad's footsteps and playing basketball in college and doing the whole thing. But the reason I was really drawn to rowing and decided to pursue it to the next level is because I just fell in love with it. I was good at track, and that's really kind of what got me to Andover, right? They were kind of recruiting me. I got a partial athletic scholarship to Andover because of, my sort of raw talent, unharnessed at the time. And I, played basketball there, and we did very well. And I played water polo, which was just so much fun. But when I started rowing, I just immediately fell in love with the sport. I had never done anything that challenged me so physically and mentally together. And like, it was like the endorphin high, I think. Like now when I'm looking back on it, like I had never worked out like that. I had never pushed myself to those limits. And I was thriving on that. Like I loved to be able to challenge myself and to go to levels I'd never been before. And it really, like, I kind of got addicted to the sport, so to speak. And then of course I had some early success. Like I made the junior national team after only 3 months of rowing. And look, like no sugarcoating it. Like my blade was not going in the water. Like I look at pictures from junior worlds and I'm like, everyone else's blade is in the water and mine was not. So like, I really did suck, technically.
Suck enough to make the junior team. I love it.
Yes, but I had the power, and they were like, well, maybe she could do something with that power. But as we all know, you have to put your blade in the water to make it work. But yeah, I mean, that early success sort of catalyzed that love of the sport even more. And I was like, shit, I could do something. Like I could go to the next level here. And it was sort of very early on that I kind of got the vision, I think is the best way to say it, the vision that it would be possible to maybe be on the national team. Like I just went to the junior worlds, like, let me go to the Olympics. And so I just fell in love with the sport really early on, the team aspect, and just the physical exertion.
Just really quickly, just to keep the audience kind of abreast of the timeline. Did you row before you went to Andover or no?
I didn't row. My mom, when she knew I was going to go to Andover, she sent me to like a rowing camp at UNC. And so I had gotten in a boat before, but I never like rowed.
Okay.
And the reason that she did that is because she read an article in the Wall Street Journal about scholarship opportunities for women in rowing. And she was like, well, you're going to go to college and it'd be great if you get it paid for. So let's have you row. You're huge.
So kind of like backed into it, right? So like you were saying, like, I agree. We talked about it. We had another guest on who played Dan Beery, who played collegiate basketball in Tennessee. Who, also just kind of backed into rowing in a weird way. But yeah, it was, that was just for clarity for the audience. Just, I think it's a really fascinating early part of the story. Again, 3 months of, holding an oar. Now all of a sudden you're in the junior national team and you're racing internationally. And then, you're picking up a sport that really wasn't your primary sport. It was just kind of like, hey, let's see what happens here. And, you might be physically capable of making something happen. So I think that's a really interesting piece of the story. So thank you for that.
Dude, that's so cool. It's, I love dispelling the myth too of how people get into rowing as well. Is, my wife works at Morgan Stanley now, Caroline, which, I mean, I don't know how much you remember Carrie, but expecting her to work at Morgan Stanley was not what we predicted. And she was in the office just recently, and two people asked her, or people were talking about boys in the boat, and someone said, oh, Carrie's husband was a rower. And their first response was, well, what boarding school did he go to? And like, I'm a public school kid all the way.
Yeah.
And I think it's interesting too, is that even though rowing is very much a boarding school sport, that you got a scholarship there, right? So
Yeah.
I think, the fact that they were able to identify your athletic talent so early on is pretty amazing. And you talk about how you were really skilled at these other sports as well. The fact that rowing is so brutal, it really is just, there's no dicing it around. Like, sure, it's beautiful on the outside and there's rhythm and all that stuff, but it is a grind. And it seems like that it's the grind that really kind of enticed you to stick with it and pursue it and dive deeper into it. So can you explain a little bit about what the rowing grind means to you and what tools
Yeah.
you use to get through it?
Absolutely. And I just want to make one other comment about sort of the other sports and the difference between that and rowing is that like, I think I had almost like too much raw energy and power for some of those other sports in high school. Like I remember coming down the court on the basketball team and I probably fouled the girl, but I like went up and I got that ball out and she didn't score the goal, but it was like aggressive. Right. And they pulled me aside and I was like, well, I'm just playing the game. And then in the pool, this one girl was complaining that I was like throwing out her shoulder and I'm just like, I'm just going for it. So I think that there was also like a raw aggression that rowing provided an outlet for that I had never, I was always too big. I was always too aggressive. I was always too strong for these other sports, even though, sport is aggressive. But I think I sort of challenged the boundaries a lot. And so rowing really gave me the opportunity. And so I think to your initial question about grind, I think that's part of what I loved about it, that I could just like hammer it out, get all of that aggression and energy out in a way that wasn't physical contact, right? It's not a contact sport. And so I was able to just hit it hard and like get down there in the pain of rowing, right? And so I think, there's a part of me that really loves that innately, just kind of pushing myself physically and feeling the pain and then being done with that. When you're done with the piece or done with the race or whatever. And like, look, I don't know, I'm old now. And so I don't really do a lot of the grind with sport now, but I mean, I had a lot of energy. So, and it was, especially early on in my career, I never really had to like keep any sort of, I never had to like trick myself into like, okay, let's go. Or, I mean, of course you would kind of fear the pain at times and like you'd fear the pain of the race or the piece or the erg test, but it wasn't like I had to, pump myself up to try and like prepare for the grind, so to speak. You know what I mean?
So it seems like the grind was your motivation. That's what you want.
Yeah.
I mean, I can't speak to everybody in here. I do remember one of the amazing things I think about PTC when your cohort, like after 04, I think our group got really close together. When the women's team first showed up in 2001, and even though that was all we really knew is like this young, because Luke and I both showed up to PTC in 2001. We had this.
You know why? Also because people didn't have their head in phones all day. I mean, this was like, this was like the early 2000s. Like we weren't all on Instagram and TikTok all the time. And so like, we were like doing stuff. Like,
yeah,
I remember like we would all go out to bars together and do the golf night, go into people's houses and like actual community, like social events.
I think we actively worked to build that too.
Yeah.
Because the cohort before you, and it'd be interesting to say, kind of talk to Kate and Karn about it because they were the younger ones of that boat. But the women had just come from California. So they felt, I think, whereas PTC was already established at that point.
Mm-hmm.
So there wasn't as much interaction. And Luke, you can kind of speak to that as well because we were both there. But when 2004 was over, all of us were much closer in age. And I remember watching you row, because you were still an undergrad when I was still there, and just truly being amazed because one, I saw my people. Like, this is someone who wrestles the oar, doesn't row it, and like being like coming from combat sports and staying in it. I always say to people, there's a lot of similarities between wrestling and rowing, and if you listen to do both, the difference is in rowing, bruises are on the inside.
Yeah.
Like you are in a wrestling match with yourself, and that becomes it. And we all knew you were stellar, right? From having a little bit of experience and going to one Olympics, kind of everybody knew that you were going to be in that boat, and not only in that boat, but a driving factor of it. And tell me a little bit about that process of like what that mindset was, because the national team is a jump. No matter how talented you are, once you get there, everybody's talented. And what was your mindset coming from that really historic Princeton women's crew and not really having to change much, but other than your coach and maybe the locker, maybe your locker in the boathouse? And
I kept the locker.
Yes. Yeah. And so like talking to Steve, I think when you come to Princeton Training Center from outside Princeton, you have this whole world that you have to learn to navigate. Whereas when you come from Princeton, you have this comfort, right? It's your lake, it's your boathouse. You've been watching the national team since you were a freshman. So tell me a little bit about what your mindset was. Is like, was that an advantage, a disadvantage? Did you feel like, all these other women got to kind of pay homage to me because this is my house? Or was
Well,
it
I never felt that exactly, but I did feel a little bit of ownership over the boathouse
Okay.
and the locker. Which is funny. When I eventually retired from sport lawyer, I was like, we got to put a plaque on this locker. It's like Caroline Lynn's locker, because I had it for 15 years or something. But
did she do it?
No, she should.
She should.
I'd probably have to fund it, right?
As
an
they're all
alumni.
brand new lockers. Now they're all brand new lockers. Like I went in there, I did the same thing. I kept my locker for forever.
I had to share Steve's locker a couple of times because we got kicked out during the year.
Yeah.
When the national team guys would get kicked out.
Well, that was also a benefit, right? Because I always got to keep it, even if the national team got kicked out for whatever reason. But let me
that was because you were a badass and you were like, I don't care. I'm keeping it.
Yeah, I was pretty stubborn then. Yeah, I was pretty I'm doing what I want to do. But let me set the scene in terms of that transition. And look, not some people know this, some people might not. I actually started training with Tom the summer after my junior year of high school. So I made the junior national team after my sophomore year. And then I was too old because I had gone to public school in North Carolina for 2 years. And when I went to Andover, I repeated. So I was older. And that following summer, I was going to go to a senior development camp and then and I was getting recruited, right? So I told the college coaches what regattas I was going to be at with this senior development camp. And I think the senior development camp was in Rutherford, New Jersey. But I got there and I was like, what are these people doing? It was like a senior development camp. I was like, this is not serious. These people are flopping around in the water. And so one of the coaches that was recruiting me was Kevin Sauer. And I think this is a really important story to tell because I think Kevin's amazing. And this moment really gave me an opportunity that otherwise wouldn't have. And it just shows the power of coaches, even if they're not your college coach, right? And I was seriously considering UVA, right? Because I'm from North Carolina. It really felt like home, kind of Southern. Ended up going to Princeton, of course. But I called Kevin because he was recruiting me. I was like, look, Kevin, I'm not going to be at these races because this senior development camp is just like a joke. I'm just going to go home or whatever. And he's like, oh gosh, well, okay, thanks for telling me. But, and then he called me back and he was like, look, I called the national team coach and I asked, I told him the situation of kind of where you are and what's happening. And he, is going to let you come down there and train with the national team for a little bit. And I was already in East Rutherford, New Jersey. So it was just a drive down to Princeton. So I remember driving my car down to Princeton and getting a hoagie somewhere and pulling into the boathouse, for my week long, stay with the national team. It was I was just 18 years old. I was just a kid. First of all, driving in New Jersey was terrifying. I can't believe I did that. but
I don't think
I
it
got it.
hasn't changed. Hasn't
Yeah,
changed.
no, it hasn't
Still
changed.
terrible.
Still terrible. And I trained with the national team for a week, and after it was like a trial period, and Tom said, okay, like I'm gonna let you stay and train here, but don't get a big head. And I'm like, okay. I was like, are you kidding? Like, I'm not. And then of course I didn't make the team that summer, right? I tried out, I seat raced people and I didn't make it. But I started sort of that process. I was in Princeton. I kind of understood like the little town a little bit. And so every summer after that, until I actually made the team in 2005, I was training with the national team. And it was all because of Kevin Sauer going out on a limb and calling Tom and asking him if I could come down there, that I was able to do that. And that was really incredible. And also I think it's important, that part of my story is really important. I want people to know that I did not just make the team. Like I didn't just like, oh, all of a sudden make the national team and I was on it for however many years. I tried out for a lot of years and I got cut for a lot of years. I got cut. And even the summer after my sophomore year, they invited me to train with the tryout for the Olympic boat and I went over to Varese and I was seat racing against Anna Michelson and Kate Johnson for a seat in the 2004 boat. And I didn't make it. It was like really tight, close racing, but and other than, when I wasn't like in their seat racing, I was out in like a single on Lake Varese. But it was like an incredible experience, but I didn't make it. So I think it's really important to highlight how many times I didn't make it before I actually made it. You got to stick with it. But all that really got me comfortable with sort of the national team setting and with Princeton. And then of course, going there, I didn't choose Princeton because of the national team. I chose Princeton because of Lori Daphne, but it certainly helped the transition when I did transition fully to the national team. I forgot what the question was, but I just thought that was really important.
No, I think the question was just about mindset. I think it's really
that was
good.
amazing.
So I
amazing.
think
That was
it's
amazing.
I think it's also important to like just spell out, Caroline, as we kind of went through it together, right?
Yeah.
We were coming up in that time when there was no under 23 team, right? Like what it's known now. So for
Right.
anyone who might be
Oh wait, there was
because there was that from
Steve,
Nations Cup and then Nations
cut?
Cup and yeah. And then
Well,
it like went
sometimes
away
they had
for a
it
year.
and sometimes they didn't have
And
it. Yeah.
it really like what it is now didn't like I think they cut Nations Cup in like 03. And then
Luke
there
would
was
know.
nothing in 04.
Yeah.
And then it started coming back as like its current iteration of the under 23 championship in 05. So there was that donut where like I think it's you had the skill to be playing with the big girls, but B, like there wasn't like kind of a set out development pathway there.
Yeah.
And as much as there is nowadays. So you
Yeah.
just had to you were like drinking from the fire hose like for a few years before you learned to like keep your head above water and then thrive in it. Right. And it's like I'm thinking about it like, and I'm listening to this and I'm like, oh yeah, I remember that. Like, because in that sophomore summer, like you were off in Varese, I was like it would have been so easy for them to send you in like the straight four, and you could have been in Bagnoles with me, and and some some of the other all stars that were in that group. But it's awesome that you were kind of on the cusp there. So like I think that whole under 23 thing is important to spell out for anyone who's like, and it's the same when we're like, yeah, we got cut from the junior team or made the junior team, right? Like it was there's no, nowadays there's like 8 different junior teams.
Totally.
Right. So for someone to say, oh yeah, I got cut from the junior team, or I made like, when you make the junior team, they're like, you made it through all those people. Like, but if you're like, yeah, I didn't make the junior team, you're like, yeah, there weren't that many, there wasn't those options. So I think it's awesome. You definitely had a big head, which I thought was like like your superpower when, you know, coming into Princeton. I was starting to tell the story before we hit record, where I remember meeting you, and I was like, oh, like, you know, you're a freshman, and we're sitting in like the, like, oh man, like, you know, just big and strong, like, this is awesome, right? And I was like, oh, you're a freshman, and you go, no, I'm on varsity. Like you were like, I was like, okay, so this is what I'm dealing with, you know. But I think it was,
I don't remember that.
I remember that first interaction, that, you know, and that was, but then I was just like, all right, like, okay, so, you know, let's go. You know, I thought it was just an awesome environment to be a part of, and those connections were, you know, it was so much the, okay, I'm gonna talk game, but I'm also gonna go out and do it. And then,
Yeah.
like, you know, to be, you know, just inspired around that was really fun to be a part of.
Caroline,
And
I mean,
you,
so yeah. Oh, go ahead, Justin.
no, I was just, we may take this in a different direction, so you can stop me, Dan. But can you just go back a little bit? I think that it's really important for, again, the people that are listening to the show. Your point of, I tried, I didn't make it. I tried, I didn't make it. Tried, I didn't make it. We've heard that theme from a lot of people on the show so far in 5 short episodes. So I think part of that mindset of like, I'm gonna get back up. It's gonna come back. I think that there's something really interesting, and I'd love to hear in your words a little bit of that like breakthrough. And I think, Dan, this might be a leading question for you
Well,
as far
you're
as
you're just you're my coxswain, man. You're thinking what I'm thinking,
The
right?
mindset thing. Yeah. No, that's an
well,
important point of something that, yeah.
yeah, it's that, but it's also like, is it relief? Is it they're like, okay, I've my name is on the paper. I'm on the board. It's official. I'm in the boat. The breakthrough, a little bit of like, you know, when you start to you know, have this high performance mindset start to appear for you of like, all right, I know I'm capable. I know, and this is on the senior level, not the collegiate level, not the junior level, but on that, you know, top
Yeah.
1%, 0.5% of
Yeah.
people in the world. Yeah, Dan, you can finish
How
the
did that
thought, but
start and when did that start? Yeah.
yeah,
No, I'd love.
just that whole process, because again, I think it's super important that everybody understands like these are not gimmies, they're not layups, they're not,
Yeah.
you know, there's only 9 seats in these boats, you know, that go. So yeah.
Yeah. And of course there was like nervousness when I first got in a boat with the national team girls, or, you know, I was training with them or trying out. Of course there was nervousness, but, and I don't know if it's because I was naive or delusional or what, but it was like very early on, I had this goal and this vision of winning 2 Olympic gold medals. And for some reason that got in my head. And at first I wanted to win them in the same Olympics. I wanted to be in the 8 in the pair, but because that's what the Romanians did. But I just had that goal in my head and I just was like doing it. And I don't know, I had a really, and I think in sport, I'm kind of better at this than perhaps in life sometimes, is just compartmentalizing, right? Like just doing the thing, doing the athletic thing, going out there, competing, whatever. And then win, lose, or draw that day in practice, like being able to like remove myself and just like go to sleep, relax, whatever. And so the motivation for me was always the vision that I had very early on, which was Olympic gold medals. And I had the idea that I sort of allowed myself to even have that vision because I hadn't really success. And I was like, it just seemed like, why not? I mean, there was nothing, and maybe this is, I don't know, a luxury to be able to even dream like that, and not naive or something, but I got that in my head early on and I just went for it. There was no one saying you can't do that. And there's no one saying, I'm not going to support you in that. Like my parents were always like, whatever, yeah, go do that. You know, we're behind you, you know? So I just kind of did the thing and I just did it every day and just kept doing it. And, that was my motivation, right? Just like having that vision and then just like chipping away at it every day.
I think I would call it a superpower. Like your superpower was totally like your self-confidence, or, you know,
which is so
when,
interesting because I don't always feel self-confident. Like I feel really insecure in a lot of ways. And I don't know if that, I kind of feel like that maybe developed. Like I do remember
yeah.
college, and I feel like I was really confident in college, and maybe some things set in for whatever reasons after college. But yeah, I mean, it's weird to look back and think like, why did I believe that I could do those things? Right. So yeah, it's strange.
Especially, Caroline, thank you so much for what you're sharing so far. Like this is so strong, right? Like you're such a strong person, and I've always admired you for your intensity. I really did. Like like I said, I've been a fan of yours for a long
The
time.
intensity is a blessing and a curse, though.
Well,
I
and I
mean,
think, and that's, I have the intensity bug. You can ask my teammates
yeah.
as, and I think that goes with everybody. Um, you know, Steve and Luke had this incredible discourse the other day about process versus adaptability, and that's just human characteristics. You just think about, Superman or Superwoman. Their strength is they can lift up the whole world, but if they squeeze a human too hard, they break them. So I think that's the juxtaposition of your strength is your weakness, and there's certain environments where you don't realize your strengths becoming your weakness because it's been so successful. It's been such a useful tool for you for so long that we don't learn how to adapt. But one of the things I just picked up on that is really important, because our goal of this is, like, our audience, we want to be all fans of rowing, but one of them is for young kids that are being fed this, this BS that there's a hack to everything in life. Right? Here's 10 things to make you better. Here's AI to help. And when it comes to doing incredibly great things, like just getting recruited to Andover for sport is great. And then as you level it, the juxtaposition of you doing these summer camps and getting cut, and then having to just switch gears and step up and lead at Princeton. How is that duality as a young woman? Because again, we're talking about you barely breaking 20 years old. And they're like, in the moments where you felt like you couldn't pick yourself back up, what were the tools that you used in those moments to pick yourself back up? And like, whether it was to not let down your Princeton team, whether it was not to let down yourself, whether it was how to gear yourself back up for the next summer, what tools did you use when it felt like you wanted to give up, but yet that vision, were like, nah, I'm clawing myself back to that vision? Because that's, to me, you more than most people in rowing that I've talked to had this really amazing difference between being cut while in college, but then being this complete game maker, game changer in college too. So I'd love to know a little bit about that. Is like, what tools did you use?
This is a great question. There's so many things I want to say. Well, first of all, I think having a great coach really makes all the difference, right? Lori empowered me. And I know, like, with any coach, not every athlete is going to love them or whatever, but I think the majority of people do love Lori.
I
She,
love Lori.
yeah, yeah, we all do. Most of us do. 99% of us do. She just supported me like a parent, like undyingly, and in a way that allowed me to be my best. Now, let me give you an example. And part of this example is pretty embarrassing and whatever, but we got there in the end, right? So I think it was, and to the first part of the question is like, how did you pick yourself up after you like disappointments? It's so interesting when I think back on that time. I don't remember being like crushed at any point. Like it was almost like, okay, well, it's not my time yet. So I think there is an aspect of like being able to see the reality in front of you, right? And like, and the understanding that things don't happen right away for anything. Like having the mindset of there are no hacks, right? You do have to work to get to where the end goal, right? Like things don't just come automatically. And I don't know if you learned that from your parents or your younger years or what, but that was always like, okay, so I got cut, but I'm still young, I'm still in college, I got other things to look forward to. But maybe I think it was like my sophomore year or maybe summer after my freshman year. I asked like somebody like what the average weight was of the girls of the boat, of the women's 8. And they thought I meant the weight of the boat. And I was talking about like the weight of the humans. And so someone said, oh, 203. And I was like, okay, well, I got to be 203. Like I have to weigh 203. Okay. So like, I was like bulking up and I got like kind of chubby. And that summer, like in 2003, instead of there was one other girl, Samantha McGee, and she got invited to take a year off from college, and she ended up making the 2004 boat, and I didn't get asked to take the year off. And I think later I found out because I was like a little heavy or whatever. And that was back in the day when, you know, you could, I guess, judge people and tell people they were overweight. And I was, but just because I thought that's what other people were, and I wanted to have the power, and I was like committed to doing whatever I could to get there. But it was like, I mean, embarrassing that there was something lost in translation there. So anyway, I just remember like after that, like, no, Lori never said anything to me about my weight, but she just like started going on runs with me, right? Like just started kind of slow, like we would just like go chat and we would like go on runs before practice. And my weight came down like very quickly. And I just like, I don't know if I realized that, like, I don't know if I realized that it was the boat weight and not the person weight, but I don't know. I think like things like that happen, like, and maybe it all happens for a reason, because I'm really glad that I was able to have that college experience in, you know, the 4 years and not have it broken up with a year off to go to the Olympics. Like, and then we won everything my senior year. And that's like kind of incredible. So it probably all happened for a reason, but like random things happen. Like success isn't linear. Like you do stupid things or you make a mistake or whatever. And if you have people around you that are there for you and like those mentors that support you, I think that's what really makes a difference. Like Lori was able to like guide me back onto the right path in a very subtle and effective way. And in a way that only someone who actually cares about you and loves you would do. Right. And obviously it was in her best interest too, right? Because she wanted me to be effective for the Princeton boat, but it was also like important for my long-term success. So I mean, to answer your question exactly, I think like I never really had those moments where I was totally like distraught over like a cut or anything like that. It was always like, it's not my time yet. It's not my time yet. So I think, you know, if possible, people need to remember that things tend to happen for a reason, as terrible as they are. Like I recently got laid off. And so, you know, you when that happens, you feel, what could I have done differently? This is so terrible. My life is over. I've made all the wrong decisions getting up to this point. And I went through a lot of like really like hard emotional times in the past, you know, couple months. But I do think things happen for a reason. It's just, you just don't know when you're going to be able to reflect and see that is the case. So I think keeping that in mind when you're going through some of these tough times is important.
So thank you for sharing that. You know, especially like how you're dealing with the present. And, you know, it's funny, I'm listening to you talk and you know, I had a massive panic attack last year, first one ever. And, you know, you build your whole persona on being a big, strong guy amongst being strong guys. And, you know, when you can't get on a plane all of a sudden, and, you know, I have to carry at home and my 2 daughters at home, and, you know, it's, your resiliency, you know, just going through all these stories and where you are right now, and the confidence that you had of just reliving that moment about getting laid off and just saying it and owning it in the open. And these conversations have been great because it really is just a bunch of rowers talking. But your strength that you just showed, Lind, I mean, Jesus, I feel so much stronger, right? Like you just made me feel so much stronger, so much stronger. Thank
Dan,
you.
Let's get real here. Like, look, I don't really have much to hide. but it's interesting because I was at this like 4th of July party with other parents. I took my kiddo there, and this guy was like, yeah, I'm just like in between things now. And then I was like, I got laid off. And then this other guy next to me was like, oh yeah, me too. And then that guy was like, oh yeah, that's the boat I'm in. So it was like, he didn't want to say it, but then I was like, I got laid off 2 months ago. Like, and then it was like, yeah, we're all, and there were like 3 people there that have gotten laid off. Like, it's a hard time. And, but I have also, you know, dealt with some serious depression and anxiety recently. This past job that I got laid off from, I mean, like going back to things happen for a reason. I really think things happen for a reason because this place was toxic. Toxic people, toxic work environment. Not too long into my time there, I was majorly depressed. I'll just say this. I was having suicidal ideations. Like, it was not good. Okay.
So sorry. So sorry.
And I had never done that, never before, right? Like, I've always like been anxious, but like been able to get through it. But it was like, and similar to you, it was affecting my relationship with my child. And I didn't want him to see his mother like that or feel my anxiety or my depression or my whatever, right? Like, it's hard because it's not just you anymore. Your actions are impacting another human and someone who you love the most. And I went on medicine, and like, I've been in therapy, and I'm in a better place now. And, you know I'm going to be in an even better place going forward. And I'm never going to let myself get into that sort of toxic environment. But it really makes you appreciate like the years of rowing, the team, the support, the coaches, the people who like the genuine people, because there are so many fake fuckers out there. And there are people who don't give a shit about anyone else but themselves and who will use you for all that you are worth.
Mm-hmm.
And that is what I experienced, just being squeezed dry and used. And lied to, quite frankly, in the interview process for that job, like telling me all these things, how great it was, and none of that. And then I got, I just went through I had anxiety attacks, I had complete depression, and I'm, still in therapy. So I think, look, there's no shame in talking about it. There's no shame in the way in how you feel or whatever, and it doesn't make you less of a person. And I think in the end it'll only make you a more compassionate person, to be able to understand yourself and to be able to be there for your children and the people that you really care about. So
I love you. Thank you.
You too. Don't make me start crying.
No, we're not gonna make you start crying.
I'm already crying. I always cry. You can ask these guys. I cry almost every episode.
Thank you for sharing that. I think that's so real, and it's the real truth of the matter, right? I think you're right. There's an empathetic situation that's going to arise from this. That's going to make you a better person, employee, partner, mother, etc. Going back though, I think it's important to talk about. We talked about it a little bit on the show. The mental side of kind of like performance and success, in maintaining that, and the pressures that may or may not exist for some people versus others. So just to again, not totally, amazing bit of what context what you just gave, but shifting back just a little bit, maybe a little more fun piece of the conversation to talk through. Is just kind of like, hey, take us through that process of you can start to see your goals, right? So you've already talked about like, I wanted to be a double Olympian in the same year, or I knew I wanted to win 2 gold medals in the Olympics. Like, I had a North Star, which we find to be very important in a lot of the context of the conversation we've had of setting goals and then chasing hard, chase. So you've made the team, and you're like, all right, I'm gonna go, race in world championships, and then you win a world championship, then you win another world championship, and then you win another world championship, and then you you win a gold medal in the Olympics, and then I'm going to go after another Olympics. And so just take us through a little bit of that, like pressure cooker of success, if it did or didn't exist for you. Maybe it didn't. I don't know. You'll tell us. And then a little bit, I thought it was really cool. We had Dan Dan Beery on a previous episode talk to us a little bit about like gold medal final, like just put us in the boat, and I think that that's super cool, especially for the audience that we're hoping that will listen to the show, is like there's only like 9 people in the world that get to experience that every 4 years. That's a pretty special thing. So I think that like I know I just asked you a ton of stuff, so let me just start with question 1 would be, okay, you're starting to see your North Star get brighter because you're like, all right, like my goal of going to the Olympic Games is going to happen. Now I get to see if I can make it happen. Or you've won a world championship where you're like, all right, maybe you're 250 meters to go and about to win your first world championship. Just like, can you put us in that scenario? And then part 2 of that question is, when you start to stack wins on wins on wins on wins, is there a weight of success that comes with that, as we're talking about this mental pressure cooker that is or may not exist, because rowing is very different obviously than professional, maybe not, but I understand what you're saying as far as like corporate world is a very different mentality sometimes than the rowing world, having lived in both sides of it, where it's very hard to explain a community in a corporate environment, right?
Yeah.
Like
It's
peers.
not the same.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah,
it's very
exactly.
rare to find that in the
Mhm.
corporate space. And if you find it, you got to stick with it. Stay there.
Sure.
There is a little bit of the weight of success. Like I would say a lot of the question I get a lot from people is like, oh, 2 Olympics, which one do you love more? And I'm like, oh, I'm always like, it's like choosing your favorite child. Like you can't choose, but they are different, right? They're different feelings going to them. I was at different places in my life. I was a different athlete on the team in the context of the team. And also there is a little bit of the weight of success going into, defending an Olympic championship title. But I will go back to that. I just somehow innately had this ability to compartmentalize and sort of just be in the moment, which I think is maybe a lesson I can remind myself of now, in my life as a mother and a, person in the working world, like just be in the moment, right? Try not to worry about what's happening ahead or behind, like just do the thing that's in front of you. And I think for me, it actually kind of got easier, right? Like it was just like, I have more confidence. We're just going to pause for a minute. My dad's getting ice out of the ice maker. Can you hear that?
No, I can't.
No, you're okay. It's fine.
Okay.
This isn't, by the way, it's not
Yeah.
1000% high def production
Yeah.
quality. So
Okay.
it's fine. My baby might cry in the background. He's 35 days old. Like, it's okay.
Yeah, Cersei might barge in any moment because she got so sunburned from camp, right? So like this is us,
Okay.
dude. This is
I'm
us.
like, can they hear the ice being tinkled
I
around?
hope we can. Tell Mr. Lind hi too.
He's over there.
You can poke his head in.
Yeah, they came into town because Brandon was at Henley for like 2 weeks, and I was like, I need help with the kid.
I got to see the big man bunch.
Oh yeah, he sent me that. He sent me the picture of you kissing him. That's great. Yep. Yeah. So I think like I was able to just be in the moment, and it actually kind of got a little bit easier, right? Like I was able to have a confidence each starting line that I sat at, and was able to successfully get down the finish, across the finish line first, with my teammates. It just gives you a little more and more and more confidence, that it is possible. And I don't know, I always just had, I don't know, I always just had a real calm in the boat. I remember there was this one race in Linz, Austria, and it was a World Cup. I was with Susan, we were in the pair, and it was earlier on, but I don't know, we had like 4 pairs. And I just remember we were like warming up for a race, and they were like, I think it was the heat, because they were like, she was like really this. And I was like, just chill. We're good. We're just going to go to the start line. It's going to be fine. She was in bow seat. And I remember they were like blowing up one of those like signs on the side of the course. And like, we did a power 10 and bounced off of the side. We like whiplashed. And I was like, and she was like freaking out. She's great, but she was freaking out in that moment. And I was like, Susan, chill. We're good. We're good, dude. So I don't know. I always felt like I was kind of like, in these moments that could be really stressful or tense, I just got like really focused and really calm. And I was like super chill, which is not really my personality. You guys know me. I'm just like, ah. So I'm just like crazy. And I do bring that energy into the race. Like when I'm in the race, like I'll scream, I'll talk, I'll do whatever. But like when we're getting up to the starting line, I'm just like, okay, we're good, you know? And I don't know where that comes from. I think that's, it's just, it just is what it is. But that really helped in terms of, not letting sort of the anxiety or trying to live up to expectations or whatever.
So cool. That's so cool.
Yeah. And do you think part of that was, I know that you had a lot of bosses, like I'll just call them bosses, that were like badasses that were in your boat along the ride, right?
Oh yeah, there's a
lot of
trust.
consistency.
Oh yeah.
So
And
yeah, how much do you
yeah.
attribute to that of like, we've been here and like I worked with a lot of motorsports and Olympic athletes in my career. And they've always are like very, they talk a lot about seat time and time in the seat and experience. And it's just, what to expect. And if it happens, it happens, and how to handle the situation. So I'm just curious as to, like, I'm really big into like the Tour de France right now because it's going on. And like, if you think about it, like some of these guys that are just, they're like, it's okay, the breakaway can go, like, we're going to catch them. We know what's going to happen. Like, there's no kid's got legs that are that strong. But
Yeah.
that said, like, sometimes they do, but most of the time. How much do you attribute to that? And then I think, again, a lot of it probably is personal mindset, but I also wanted to see how much of that was community and
100%.
Yeah.
100% community. Like, I mean, whenever I talk about my success on the team, I always talk about like, I was successful because there was a group of like-minded women who were equally as strong and crazy as I was that believed that we could do this. And they all came in at the same time. Right. And so, I would not be here. I would not have achieved whatever I have achieved, unless those women had been on the team with me. Right. And so I think like just having that reassurance in the races, that there is that person that if I have a couple strokes that I miss, or I'm like, whatever, something happens, like those people are going to be there to like pick up the slack in that part or those two strokes so that, we can still get there. Right. You just know that like, not everyone can be 100% on every stroke in a 2,000 meter race. And that's the whole point of rowing. And so, knowing and trusting that you have those teammates there that are equally as crazy as you and we can all fill in each other's gaps, so to speak, and get us there. Like just trusting that, I think also allowed us to have that kind of success and create that kind of balance.
Yeah, your cohort was so much fun to be part of from the other side of the boathouse. The reflection and going back has been so amazing. One of the things that I'm asked a lot is like, how did it all happen at that time? And what really excited to ask this question, because I definitely got into rowing in high school with the idea that I want to be an Olympian, and my story is not for here, but it's my story is not expected. It's very unique how I got to the Olympics. But my biggest motivation was medals are nice, but I want to go faster than any human's ever gone in a boat, period. Like I wanted to break the time-space continuum. And I remember leading into 08, both Tom and Mike sitting there and like talking about practices. And we would talk about practices, when we would go out or would be at a party, about, Carnegie is such a unique lake because it's a lot of empirical data of speed. And we were just crushing records from 04 to 08, like going faster than any rowboats had ever gone, ever. And some of them still to this day, like maybe not the 2K, but shorter distances. And, I'd love to tell the audience, especially young rowers that are feeling like they have to be this perfect package right now and going just back full circle to like, us being in this position to be mentors, to kind of open up our own dojo, to have our own school of, yeah, this is an Olympians talking to Olympians about Olympic stuff, not just for us to talk about the good old days, but there's really good knowledge in here that I think the future, I hope this team going to Paris has the best Olympic performance ever. I really do. And, what was it like for you women to kind of do what we were doing in practice on the men's side, which was just knocking the socks off of world record times and just seeing stuff like, we had one practice where we had 2.8s, I believe, go 3:57. Like just going faster than any humans have ever gone before in a rowing boat. What was that like for you and your cohort?
That was really, it's interesting that was a real motivating factor for you, because it wasn't for me. I mean, obviously I wanted to go fast and I love to be the best. And I love to have the fastest, I love to have records. I love to be in a boat that has a record, like that feels good. But there's so many aspects of any given race that can like make an impact. Headwind, tailwind, current, whatever, like it almost is a little arbitrary, at least to me, right? It felt a little bit arbitrary. All that mattered to me was getting my bow over the finish line first. That was what mattered to me. And so, but that was incredibly inspiring. I mean, I don't know, there's just, I don't know where that innate fight comes from to want to push past barriers to get your bow over the finish line first. I think it's a little bit crazy. And that's why I sort of describe myself and my teammates as like crazy in a lot of ways. But you got to have a little bit of that, right? There's got to be the fight. And like, I've been in so many races where there's a crab or there's a this, or there's a bobble, or there's a that, or you're coming from behind, or you're like, a boat length down, like, and you come through and like, you just have to do, like, you do that a couple times, and you're like, okay, I can do this, and honestly, it all starts in practice. Like, I remember in college, we were doing like races the length of the Carnegie. And it was just in college boats, but I think I might've been stroking, I think I was stroking one of them, but we were coming around the outside of the big turn. We were coming around the outside of the big turn, like, and we were going, and I was like crazy. And I was like, we have got to beat them. And we were like pushing, and we were like getting ahead of the other boat, even though they had the inside of the turn. Right. And I think it's just like being in those scenarios where you just like fucking make a decision and you like go for it and you do it. And then you can do it. And then you do it in a race and you can do it. And then you realize that the pain that it is to do it is less, than the joy of winning. So then you do it more and more. So
Well,
the cost benefit analysis.
Hey, look, I describe us all as crazy too, in a very fun way. You do have to have a certain aspect of the world, and I want to go back to Justin's question. And this is very selfish, but it is Fast Friends with Dan Walsh. So I'm going to use the title to my benefit right here. London was a tough Olympics to watch for me, just because I got injured right before the team was named and didn't have enough time to get back to it, and wanted it to be a swan song, and it wound up not being a swan song. And a lot of my motivation to watch those games was more to watch you and my friends defend that. I was very much a fan of the women's team at that time, because there was just so much discomfort and pain in watching the men's team. As much as I wanted those guys to do well, there's a lot of baggage that comes along with that. Especially, when you make over a decade of teams in a row type of thing, and the last one you don't.
That's how I felt in 2016. Yeah. I know exactly how you feel.
Yeah. So, and it's it's an interesting place to be because you want to be supportive, but you're also competitive. So I really watch those games for you and my female friends. So I would love to know what please put me in that boat. Like, take us through that 2012 race, because to defend an Olympic championship is really impressive. And watching that was it was the beginning of my healing process. That day was to watch you and then, and Jevi come out with that silver. So I'd love to know what London was like for you.
Yeah, happy to reflect on it. And again, I know exactly how you felt in that moment because that was how I felt in 2016. So I'm with you there. And it's a hard moment to have, like that. Those feelings are really tough. So I totally get it. 2012, it's so funny. Like when I think, like, can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Yep.
Did we drain your AirPods?
I had to get my other pair.
Yes. See, that's a prepared athlete. That's a
Yeah.
prepared athlete.
I mean, who has
I
two
gotta
pairs?
have two. If you're on a flight, you either have to do only one ear pod at a time, or you have to have two pairs. Because if you're on a long flight, it'll die. Got to be able to watch your stuff. And it's funny because when I think about going back to the fact that I'm not Lindsay Shoup and I can't remember every detail, like when I think about 2012, like I can't even remember which race it was where Mary made that crazy call in the third 500. Like, it's hard for me to even distinguish the medal stands. Like, it's funny, like the Olympic race is hard to like remember all the key points of it. But I will say that getting to that starting line, there was a lot of nervousness and a confidence that we could do this, right? Just because we had done it before, but like that weight of success that Justin was talking about before, right? There was definitely some of that in that Olympic Games. But I don't know. I mean, crossing the finish line first is not the same every time, but it's this, mixture of all the emotions, as you know. And so that was the same. So I don't know. This is a terrible answer to your question, but
No, it's actually a fantastic answer, because I mean, three things that I see is everyone's like, how'd it feel? I was like, I don't know, man, I was pulling too hard.
yeah.
Like, Beijing.
Yeah, I do remember it now. Now I remember it.
Okay.
I remember it. I remember that I made this commitment. Okay, now it's all coming back to me. Okay, it takes a minute. Let's see. I was like, I'm gonna pull, because this was my second Olympics, and I was like, I can do this. I can control this race. I was like, I am gonna pull harder in the third 500 than I ever have pulled before. I was like, from the 750 to go to the 250 to go. That's gonna be like where I'm like getting my blade in the water, and I'm like, that's usually the spot where people get tired, they lapse, their blade work starts to get really terrible. And I was like, not me. I'm going to be on it. And then
I'm not a junior anymore. My blade works
exactly.
Perfect.
I was like, that blade is going to be in the water. And then I remember in that race, I got to the 250 to go, and I was like, oh. I was like, whoops. And so if you watch that race, you will see that I'm literally not coming all the way up the slide because I was at failure. I had done it a little bit too well. And I was like, I was at failure, but that was one of those moments where you knew that, like, if you can just get to that point, there's nothing that's going to stop us as a unit from being over the finish line first with 250 meters to go. Like, my blade was getting in and going through, but like, I was only able to get up to the, and it was because I had made that conscious effort from the 750 to the 250. And, maybe I didn't have to do that. Or maybe that was part of why we stayed ahead or whatever. But like, that's what I remember about the London race.
So
That's cool.
we'll put a link in the description of that race.
Yeah.
So
People are going
so
to have to watch me in
the
the
audience
last
can watch
250.
your
Yeah.
last 250.
It's not nice.
Uh,
It's not nice.
I don't know. You
But-
won the Olympics. It's pretty nice.
but you still got there first, which, you know, I thought it was actually a really interesting point you made. I'm probably personally in the camp of you, Caroline, versus Dan. Could be a difference of opinion. It's fine. Of the records aren't what's important to me. It's winning. Personally,
Yeah.
that's just the way I'm wired. Is, you know, yes, records are cool, but you know, it's just the way that
That's
I
probably
think
why.
it's a
That's probably
mindset.
why you two win more than me.
But I think no, I think it's just an interesting juxtaposition. It's all good. Either way it works. If you're setting records, you're typically winning. But that said, no, I thought that was a really interesting distinction you made where you're like, I didn't care about a clock. I cared about crossing the line first. And I think that's it's always interesting when you have worthy competitors and you get to beat them on a continuous basis and or at the right time, at the right moment, at the right day, regardless of conditions. So yeah, super cool point you made there. Dan, you know, where do you want to take it? I think that I have a lot of questions, Carolina, also about like, you know, the point you made about, you know, your 2016, you know, your life beyond 2012, and kind of, you know, a lot of us have had this kind of conversation individually about, okay, there's such a drip and there's such a high of like winning success, like this is all you know, you've strived for, not all, but it's been a hyper focus of yours for a really long time. And then it's just, you clean the locker one day, right? And that's it. Right. And so I think that's going to be a really interesting question I have if you want to go there, of just like, okay, you know, this is, you know, there's no longer an Olympics to chase. There's no longer a seat race to go win. It's just life. You know, the next chapter has started. I'd love to kind of hear how that transition, you know, was or is, or you know, is still maybe going on. I don't know. We personally don't know each other well enough, but that's okay. But yeah, just curious on that one.
Yeah. It's a hard transition. I mean, I just remember many times just like crying in bed with Elle. Like I went over to her house and just like cry. And she was like so sweet and just like let me. And of course she was still training, you know, and went on to win again. But was such a good friend to me in that moment. It was really hard. And watching the 2016 Olympics, I had all the feelings that Dan did. Like I was bitter, I was jealous, I was all these terrible emotions that no one ever wants to have. And that you feel sometimes bad for having, right? I mean, I had great success. I had my time, but it's like, you know, I think the kind of personality that we are, when we set a goal or we have this thing in our mind that we want to do and we don't do it, there's an incredible amount of disappointment that is associated with that. And that symptom never ends. So like, for example, when I got laid off, like, yeah, my workplace was incredibly toxic, but it was also shocking and disappointing. And like, why wasn't I able to do the thing? Right. Why wasn't I able to get through that somehow? And it felt like a failure. And so that's that feeling when you're watching the teammates that you thought you were going to be with go and win without you. It feels like a failure. And no one ever wants to feel like a failure. So I think that's the root of all those emotions that come up with it. So the transition is hard. But I was really lucky to have a good partner at the time. You know, my now husband. And I just kind of, so that was a support through it. And then obviously my family. And you know, being able to refocus on something. So I was just like trying to get a job. I was like networking and doing all this stuff. So just kind of trying to keep busy in that way was also really important. And I think is always, you know, as much as these transitions can hurt and as much as some of these things do hurt, and you can't stop that, I'm always like trying to like get going, do the things, right? And
Yep.
like I just accepted a job offer yesterday. So like
Oh,
I have
congratulations.
gotten through this. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. You'll see what it is when I post it on LinkedIn after I sign the official papers. So
All right.
but yeah, it's really hard. Yeah. But it was almost like, and there's like a period of like cleansing too. It's like I almost felt like I had PTSD after being on the team for so long, and like especially, you know, with Tom as a coach. Like, look, he's a great coach. It might not come as a shock to anybody that we had our differences in terms of style. And you know, I never felt appreciated by him truly, which is some people might find crazy, but there are these comments and reactions to situations where you're like, wow, he did not believe I was going to win that race. He had no faith in me, or whatever it may be, right? And so I think, and there was an element of like masterminding and control during my era on the national team, which I'm not saying it's right or wrong. It was probably very similar to Hartmut before Tom, and I think that was just maybe how the team was structured and how the team was put together. And look, like we had a lot of great success, so I don't fault anyone for the gold medals that I won. But I feel like also after I retired from sport, I had like this period of like a weight had been lifted, right? Some of that control and like mental hold almost had, that weight had been lifted, and I was able to like be free a little bit, and a little bit of like a cleansing as well.
That's beautiful. That's beautiful. Yeah, it's tough. It's tough when you have to create a working relationship with somebody that you don't necessarily agree with. And you know, I would say that I had something similar with Mike, and you figure out how to make it work. Ultimately, what kind of helped me get through it is that in the long run, the people in the boat choose you, not the coach, because it's when the boat goes the fastest. And that's kind of why we got to this show is boat goes the fastest when people want to
Exactly.
row
And we are
together.
the ones, yes.
Yeah.
Yes. And we are the ones that are doing it. We are the
Yeah.
ones, we might not get the credit. The coach might get the credit. No, this person got all, you know, got them all. It's so great. They got them all these gold medals, but like, look, we did it. We did it. The
Yeah.
teammates did it. And my teammates gave me life every day. And it was them that I was doing it for, really, them and me, right? Like there's
All right.
there's a power
Yeah.
in the boat.
So I have one question for you that we'll see where it goes. And this is kind of what it's all about, because you have this wisdom, Lind, right? This beautiful wisdom that I'm really appreciative of you sharing with me. Like I said, you've just made me feel so much stronger than I did earlier today. And the question is, if you could go back in time and coach yourself on anything, what time in your life would that be? And what would you say to yourself?
I love this question. And it wouldn't be a specific time in my life, but I think the thing that I would tell myself is to be careful with how loud and what you are screaming from the rooftop. Like, look, like I, as you all know, am fiery, and I will say and do what I think, and I have, and like it does not always serve you, right? In 100%, right? And maybe it serves you in the boat or whatever, but I think maybe having a little more self-control and some of these emotional urges to just say crazy things or, be voicing a really strong opinion. And look, I am a proponent of people sticking to their core values and opinions, but like there is a time and place. And that is not something that I always respected, right? For saying and maybe screaming certain things, right? And so I think I would have been better off if I had just, I would look at some of my teammates who were just like a little more stoic, especially like Elle, stoic, didn't say much, but felt things. And like she and I were really good friends. And so in private, we would talk about things and we were really aligned, but I was always out there like loud and proud, right? Saying what I felt. And so I think my advice to my younger self would have been to like find a way to hold some of that in. If it's really important or like critical for safety, success, like of course, speak up, but find a way to have a little more self-control in some of those situations.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Well, that is it for me. I appreciate you so much as a person and a friend. We're really lucky to have you on the show.
Ditto.
Part of what we want
It's
to
my
do
pleasure.
here, yeah, and part of what we want to do here is you're welcome anytime. If you have something you want to talk about, just call us. We'll do another episode. You can run it how you want. If you want to start your own channel, we'll help you start your own channel. But the idea is that we are teammates here to help each other. And what I realized through my journey is that I thought the team went away when the racing went away, and I'm very happy to be proven wrong. We are always here for each other, and
100%.
You're welcome anytime on this show.
Thank you. I appreciate you guys. I shared some things with you that I haven't shared before, so I hope it's valuable, and I really hope it helps others, because I think I just think that it's almost like sometimes, women talking about childbirth, that's something that hasn't always, people don't always share with each other, like how you feel during and after. Like, I think unless we're really honest about what we're going through, people are always going to feel like they're the only one or they're alone. And so as hard as it was for me to share some of what I shared today, I think, look, like we live in a world today that supports mental health and supports, it ideally doesn't hold it against people. And I just hope that it helps other people to know that like we all go through these really hard times, right? And so I'm grateful to have you guys as friends and part of my community, and I hope this helps people.
Caroline, you're superhuman, but you're still human, baby.
Yeah.
But you are superhuman.
Awesome.
You are a badass. You are incredible. You are a trendsetter. You are a world champion, Olympic champion, and you have helped, and you will help. And we are all very lucky to have you in our sport. So thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you. That's Carolyn Lind, in her own words, taking us from Greensboro, North Carolina, to the top step of the podium in Beijing and in London, in all the twists, turns, races, wins, defeats, and successes that come along with it along the way. So, Caroline, thank you so much for being on the show today. Your insights, your wisdom were invaluable, and we can't wait to hear more from you in a later episode. Thank you. That's all for today's show. Fast Friends is a Metal Factory production. All opinions expressed are our own and those of our guests. If you like our show, follow along or subscribe with us wherever you get your content and podcasts. Thanks for listening.